approach it with gratitude, with appreciation, appreciating the people that have done things for us, but also that we start the year off on this idea of unity, that we're together. And I think that's really strong. Darlene talking about unity as our strength, and unity is our strength. So how do you prepare to be strong? You know, when we come back into the school year, oftentimes we just get right into the work without planning for family. So during this year, how are you going to take care of your loved ones? What does that time look like? How do you make sure that the part that fills you up is the part that lasts and sustains you through the run? Right? I used to draw all kind of elaborate schedules just to make sure that my wife and I had a date night. Right? So you gotta make sure that time is sacred, and really wanted to kick off with that. So a couple things in kicking off this school year that I would like us to just keep in mind and to re-ground ourselves. I always love this time of year, it's so fun. But it's busy too. Something that I'm thinking about a lot is you can't design around the will to do the right thing. Let's give that to you one more time. You can't design around the will to do what's right. You can make the most elaborate, unified improvement plans. You can make the most elaborate, strategic plans for the community. You can draw up the most beautiful documents and trackers. If you don't have people sitting at the table willing to do the right thing, the moral thing, Mr. Riley and I talked about this morning, it won't matter. And it won't create lasting change. If you have people that are scared to do the right thing for kids in the community, it won't matter. All your plans will look fancy, they'll look real good, and kids will lose in the long term. And they'll continue to. And so that's something that's really been on my heart. And then this idea of our otherness. I've been having the time and the wherewithal to go back into our Constitution and to really look at how African Americans and brown people were viewed as we built out this nation. And when you look in there, Dr. James Anderson, gives us a really insightful conversation from Congress in which they say, well, the people of color, these newly emancipated people, I think it's the Democrats at the time in Congress were saying, well, they're somewhere in between alien and citizen. That's on the record. So the system was built with our otherness in it. It was never supposed to be for most of us. And we still feel that to this day. I love Dr. Canada. He did the Harlem Children's Zone, where he comes out and says, our failing schools, enough is enough. Just the anger, the urgency. We got schools that have been failing for how long?
Decades.
And all our kids go there. Right. In the same city, in the same place, sometimes in the same zip code where schools of excellence are being created. Enough. We know what it takes to turn around schools. It's not a complex science. It's the will to do what's right by the kids and the families in those schools. In the face of blowback, resistance, absolutely. In the face of all kinds of resistance. You know, we've had leaders that have had death threats on their life for trying to increase the access that kids have to the best classes in the school. Threats on their life for classes to get your kids in there, right? But enough of that. Sonia Nieto, Dr. Nieto tells us that teaching and being an educator is inherently political work. That the act to educate is political work. You can't stay out the politics of it. As soon as you decide to help those children, you have engaged in politics. And you have to understand that piece. We're not at a time where we need neutral people. We've been neutral too long, many of us. Lisa Delpit tells us there's no achievement gap at birth. I always like to start my school year with that one. Guys, there's no achievement gap at birth. We're not inherently disabled. I was in a school where 30% of the kids were termed special education. I said, where do they do that at? Huh? And everybody's black. A third of the kids were labeled special education. Coming from failing schools. So then you have to think about, well, who in the failing school put the special education label on? But Stephen Biko, my mom, my grandma, everybody used to say, black is beautiful, right? Black is beautiful. And we got to embrace that. Right? Sometimes I'm just getting in trouble for talking about race. It's amazing. So just wanted to put that on our mind. One thing Dr. Sampson would always say is, seeing me, finding me in my education. Beautiful thing. Dr. Arlene asked me a little bit just to talk quickly about how we made really happy schools where kids have succeeded. What I would say is that there's a couple things we make sure that happen in happy schools. We put students at the center of everything we do. We don't get caught up in the conversation about who's going to teach what, who's going to do what, and you got tenure, and you don't have to mess with the poor kids anymore because you've been here long enough. No. We actually need our best teachers with our kids who need them the most. That's how I've designed school. Doesn't mean that the best teachers have been happy with me. But guess what? Those kids grew. And you can take that to the bank. Let's just check the data. Right? The other thing is that we make sure, when Dr. Sampson and I were talking about, cultural responsiveness is embedded in everything. The policies of the school. My last school, we had 30% African American teaching faculty. Right? I was the 1.8% in my school. We were at 30%. Now you were there. You saw it. It was like BT almost sometimes. Right? We had diversity. We had brown leaders of color. All of that was very important to me. And so diversity makes us stronger. That's a belief we have in all of our schools that we've done. And the money follows the kids. The resources are put in place to provide equity for our students who need it the most, while still serving our most excellent students. Right? We don't forget about anybody. So these are some of my fun, different groups here. This is TJ, MLK, Hamilton, and just happy kids, happy cultures. So let us prepare this school year with a couple things in mind. Let us prepare with our elders at our back, understanding that we stand on the shoulders of many who have come before us. Right? The people who knocked down the doors so that I could be a leader, in fact, so I could even come to school. Right. Let's talk about moving from accountable to responsible. It's a different thing. Everybody's accountable. You can be accountable for results. Do you feel responsible for the results? Are you responsible for the children under your care? Or are you just accountable for what happens to them? It's a whole different kind of sense of community there. Let's move from safe spaces to brave spaces. This is something that's really been on my heart, right? So we need to make it safe because that's the fragility of privilege. Let me create an environment where it's safe for me to hear about the pain I've caused. That's an interesting power dynamic. Things aren't that safe for our kids right now. So the kids are in harm's way. And so there's brave conversations that need to happen to get to a better place. And those conversations may not always be safe. There may be risk. A lot of people biting their tongue nowadays. They're scared about the check. But there comes a time when you have to stand up and be accountable. And you have to say what's right. The will to do what's right. We know what's going on. In many places it's not okay. And running around, gritting your teeth, complaining, not saying it, isn't helping anybody. And in fact, the kids need us to say it. If teaching is a political work, then we know we need to practice radical self-care. So again, as you start this year, how are you taking care of yourself? How are you planning for your own restoration? When are going to be your breaks? What's going to fill your cup? When are you going to be happy? Radical self-care. And right now it's needed more than ever, I believe. And one of the last things I'll leave you with comes from the scriptures, as the idea that love is a part of everything we do. What 1 Corinthians talks about what love is, right? And it talks about this piece here. And now abide faith, hope, and love. But these three, the greatest of these is love. So you can have faith that is going to work out. You can have the faith that moves mountains. If you don't have love in your heart, it's not going to work. Right? You can have all the hope in the world. People say, well, I hope things turn out all right. And I say, well, hope isn't a strategy. We're going to have to do some things to make it turn out all right. That's some sacrifices. We may have to sacrifice it all. And again, I want to thank you for your love as a community. It's meant so much to me. Absolutely. Yeah. And with that, I want to thank my great, great friend. If you don't know, many of you probably do know, Darlene is a treasure. Actually, Darlene has given me the theoretical and conceptual framework. The theoretical framework to put into play the African American male checklist, right? The college student survey, college for every student. So the literature that she's brought me, the studies, the strategies, we've made those into real actionable things that improve the lives of children. And it took a lot of courage to create that space. So with that, I want to introduce our guest, our host of honor, Dr. Sampson.
Good morning, everybody. Where's everybody at? Where's some kids? I'm like, all the work that we have put in is still worth it. We worked really hard to have this conference, but I wanted to just introduce you to the collective, because it was 3 agencies who went together and said, we've got to do something for ourselves. It was around January that I was, I said to Brother Jeff, I was waking up screaming and I was cussing too. Like every day about the world and the way things were going. And I said, this is ridiculous. We are being assaulted. This is traumatizing. And I said, I'm going to have a conference just for us, about what we need for us. And it was just kind of a nourishment idea, and then it kind of evolved in having some things for children as well. But then I also asked other groups to support us coming, and I want the members of the collectives to stand up who helped put the conference together today. So Natasha, Harvey,